This is the lecture for your motivation chapter, class 11. The objectives include understanding intrinsic motivation and how to promote it. We'll also talk about the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Then we'll discuss a humanist approach to motivation and apply it to the classroom. The humanist approach will come at the end in regards to Maslow's theory. Otherwise, you should make note of the important human factors that affect motivation.
Motivation, it's a state of being, is really how psychologists like to talk about it. So a state of being. So we have that it energizes, directs, and sustains our behavior. Three important parts there. Gets us going, that's the energizing part. And that sometimes is the hardest part, right? Just getting going. And then directing the behavior so that you're focusing in on what it is you're trying to accomplish. And then the last piece is sustaining it, keeping going until the end. Okay, so three parts, and you can think of them kind of as a timeline for the motivation for the task at hand. It's what gets people to do something and keeps them doing it. And then this last piece here is important to me because it's something that's a little bit of a pet peeve. It gets under my skin. So all children and adolescents are motivated in some form or another. And so what gets under my skin is when I hear teachers saying, you know, my students just aren't motivated. Well, no, they absolutely are motivated. They're just motivated to not do the work for you, or to avoid something, or to make excuses, right? So the motivation is there. It's just not the motivation that you, as the teacher, want it to be. So as we talk about all of this today, I really do put a lot of onus of motivation on the teacher. And some people might disagree with me on that. But I think that if you're structuring your classroom properly, if you're giving assignments and scaffolding and challenging, and you're doing kind of all of those things that we've talked about all semester, your students will be motivated to work for you, to work hard and to learn. So I put a lot of the onus of motivation on the teacher. Does anybody have strong reactions to that they might disagree, or? Yeah, Derek, what's up?
I mean, I don't mean to go against like what you say, but honestly, I think there should be a large portion of motivation that should be set on the students, because the teacher can do everything by the books and provide variety and all sorts of things. If the student refuses to do the work.
Well, so I agree with you. You're absolutely right, and at the end, behavior needs to come from the student. You know, I can set everything up. The end result will be the student doing it or not doing it. But more so, I think I have to set everything up to lead the student to do it.
Yeah, I agree with that, because, you know, even if the student, like, isn't completely motivated in a subject, if, let's say, your teacher presents something in a way where there's variety, there's excitement in it, you know, because I can be the most motivated person in the world, and then all of a sudden I go into a class where the teacher is just
or the content,
putting it in a really dull fashion, and I just sit there and I will go on into my own little world. Whereas if it's something that's maybe difficult but really fascinating and they're presenting it in that way, it motivates me further to pursue it and to understand it.
Yeah, I think we've all been there in a certain class where at first you thought, this is just not for me, and then there's the instruction or the assignment or whatever it is really does pull you in, and I find that I'm surprised with myself. Like, I never thought I'd like chemistry or whatever it was. Yeah, Heather.
I agree strongly with you, because I've worked with kids a lot in the last 5 years, and I've found that there's always a way to motivate the kid. Sometimes it may be bribery.
Right.
You can always do it.
Yeah, totally.
And even the most difficult kid who really doesn't want to be there, if you find the right thing to do with them.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it tends to take a lot of one-on-one behavior.
It's just a lot of effort and one-on-one work with teachers. Yeah. Sure, just one more thing and then we'll move on. Yeah.
Well, I agree with what you're saying as well, but the one thing that I have seen happen, which is unfortunate, is sometimes there are students who fall off the wagon, even to no fault of their own. And so when they go, and I have been in that situation where I've gone to the teacher and said, okay, how can I get back? But the teacher almost couldn't handle pulling themselves out of their own structure to get me back up or get another student back up. That I think that is part of it as well.
And maybe it's not that they can handle it, maybe it's in public school systems, I think it's a resources issue.
Maybe
too. You know, just that the resources aren't there for that teacher which is unfortunate. And I'm not advocating for it as the way to go, you know, but they're not able to step back and pull that person forward. Yeah. All right, but so if you all become teachers, I don't want you to say that your students aren't motivated. Recognize instead that maybe they're not motivated to work for you. Okay. So 2 types of motivation that we have. The intrinsic motivation is the first one. Motivation from personal characteristics or factors that are inherent in the task. So I like to think of it as being built in. That's kind of the word or the phrase that I use to help me remember intrinsic motivation is built in. So you engage in that activity because you enjoy that activity, and it's a means or an end all to itself. So you do that because you enjoy doing it, because it provides you satisfaction. You're motivated to work hard or to learn about this subject because it interests you. Okay? So that's the intrinsic motivation inside. And we compare it to the extrinsic motivation, which is provoked by external consequences. So you engage in the activity to receive some kind of reward. It's outside of you at this point. Okay? So a means to an end. I'm doing this just so I can get to X, Y, and Z. And this should be very familiar to you when we think about the chapter that we just covered a couple weeks ago on behaviorism. Okay, so we talked about reinforcement and punishment, and that overlaps a lot with the extrinsic motivation. So intrinsic and extrinsic, which one do you think we want to promote in our students? Intrinsic, yeah, we want to promote the intrinsic. So we're going to focus here. Now, does that mean as teachers that we ignore extrinsic? No, absolutely not. And sometimes you've got to pull out that deck of tricks or cards and, you know, give some rewards or even threaten some punishments to get your students to do the work that they need to learn the content. So yeah, in a world full of rainbows and unicorns, we're always up here. But in reality, it's a combination of both. Okay? I'll still harp on or talk more about the intrinsic motivation because really that is what we want for our students. We want them to love learning. We want them to be inquisitive, to ask questions for the rest of their lives, to pursue education. Okay? So let's see, which type of motivation is this? It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are far more than our abilities. It is intrinsic, yeah. I come up with excuses to put Harry Potter into my lectures. But definitely, yeah, Dumbledore, this is intrinsic motivation. So there are a lot of positive benefits from intrinsic motivation. Tons of research on this subject, and that's why we stick to the, promoting the intrinsic motivation. So those who are intrinsically motivated are eager to learn classroom material. So they're the students that are sitting up front, that want to do extra work, that want to, conduct the science experiment. They're more eager. They're willing to tackle unassigned tasks. They use effective learning strategies, so this is connecting it to information processing theory. And then they're more likely to achieve high grades. Now, grades in and of themselves can be an extrinsic motivator. Okay? But if grades truly are a measure of learning, then we can say that they're learning more information and it's, could be impacted by the intrinsic motivation for that student or that subject. So tons of positive benefits from intrinsic motivation, and that's why we want to pursue that line as opposed to the extrinsic. So I want to talk a little bit about the human factors that affect motivation. So first off, what do I mean by human factors? These are things that we all have in common. Okay? Being humans, motivation theorists, developmental psychologists have determined that these things are what we push for, that influence our motivation, and they make us all similar. So they're a human factor, it's something that's common amongst all of us. The first one is that we have a predisposition to want to explore and understand our environment as humans. Okay? So you can think of this from an evolutionary perspective or just right now. You go into a new setting and you want to figure out what's going on. Who are these people? What's the vibe here? Am I comfortable? Do I like this? Do I want to leave? You want to understand and know what's going on in your world, in your environment. There was a cognitive developmental theorist who also said this. Who was that? It is Piaget. Awesome job, Stephanie. It was Piaget. Because remember, Piaget says we're actively out in our environment, exploring things, trying to figure out our world. Okay, and so motivation theorists, they would agree. So that's the first human factor. The second one is that we strive for consistency in that understanding. And Piaget also says this, right? If we encounter something in our environment that doesn't fit with our scheme, we're going to try to make it fit, or we're going to have to create a new scheme. We get put into that disequilibrium. And we're a little bit uncomfortable there. So we want to understand what's going on. And if something doesn't fit, it's going to motivate us more to figure out what's going on. Those incongruencies. Right? The next is that we tend to choose activities for which we think we can be successful. The human race. Right? We pick things that we think we're going to be good at, or that we know we are good at. It is rare for our students to pick things that they do not feel like they're successful in, or that they have the skills to achieve that task. It's rare for all of us as humans. So the humanists, which we're basing a lot of this off of, would say that this is because we have this innate need to feel competent, to feel good at things. Okay, so all of us as humans, we want to feel good. And accomplishing things will help us do that, especially accomplishing them successfully. So we are more motivated to engage in behaviors or, learning, if it's in the classroom, if we feel like we're going to be successful. This is called self-efficacy, and there's really probably two big take-home messages from this chapter. This is one of them. So this is maybe what you want to star or highlight in your notes. Self-efficacy. So the belief that one is capable of executing certain behaviors or reaching certain goals. So I believe that I can do it. I believe I can succeed in this class. I believe that I can solve this math problem, or I can read this book. It's my own feelings or beliefs. High self-efficacy leads children to seek out new challenges. Okay, so those are the students in the classroom that are working really hard, that are trying new things, okay, that are completing their assignments. Low self-efficacy leads to avoidance and excuses. So you could be motivating your students instead to avoid the class, to avoid the work, to make excuses, to give up. And self-efficacy is a big part of this. So you can think about the classes that you're in, or the subjects that you're studying, or even some of your hobbies, and think about your own self-efficacy in that. And maybe that reflection will help you better understand this concept. So on the next slide here, there is a video of a little girl, and she's being interviewed. And she's going to demonstrate to us the importance of self-efficacy. So as you listen to her, I want you to think of this concept and think of the way that she is or is not demonstrating this. Okay?
What do you like best about school?
I like Peak. It's this thing where you go to this program. It's for smart kids who have good ideas for stuff you could do, and so they make it more challenging for you in school. So instead of for 3rd grade math, you get 4th grade math.
Why is that the best part? Why do you like that?
Because we do games, and go around the whole school looking for ants and stuff and discovering stuff.
What kinds of things interest you at school?
The playground.
What else interests you?
My teacher.
Oh, how come?
Well, because usually the other teachers just read us plain books, like nothing. And she usually she reads us like Harry Potter and all this other, and she gives us treats and stuff.
What's your favorite subject?
My favorite subject is reading,
How come?
because usually at that time I have time to read my Harry Potter book. The thing I like about reading is when you can't stop. It's like a chapter book, and it's like you can't stop. You have to go on.
What kinds of things make you want to learn something?
I want to learn when I feel like it.
What makes you feel like it sometimes?
When the teachers say like an interesting word and you don't even heard it before, and so you want to see what it is.
What makes you want to do well at school?
When I take the CSAP test. The Center and Peak, they don't give us the 3rd grade CSAP test, they give us the 4th grade. So it's challenging because they have to have times and stuff.
What do teachers do that encourages you to do well at school?
My teacher, she says, put on your ears or else the words will go in your head, ear and come out through this ear.
And that helps when she says that? What kinds of things do you think make it hard for kids to pay attention in school?
Well, usually it's because the teachers talk about stuff. It's interesting at the beginning, but then it cuts it off. It's sort of towards the end, because usually it gets boring after a while.
So what in there resonates with some of the things we're talking about as far as motivation is concerned? Not only self-efficacy, but overall. What are some of the things you noticed?
Well, at one point she mentioned that she liked her teacher because she got treats.
Yeah, and what would that be? Intrinsic or extrinsic? Yeah, so there's a little combo there.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, Heather.
Overall, she seemed very intrinsically motivated
Uh-huh.
because she talked about loving to read. I like to take the CSAPs. What kind of kid likes the CSAPs?
Right? But why did she like the CSAP?
Because it was
Because
Yeah.
it was challenging.
It was challenging. Yeah. And not only was it challenging, but she felt confident in taking on that challenge because she was in this program, this PEAK program. So she's been identified as a student who's doing really well. So the school system challenges her, and she feels like, yeah, I can do this. It's going to be hard, but I can do this. Right?
You could see the pride in her face when she talked about the program and that she was in it and the things they got to do, and you know, they made it very encouraging for them instead of saying, oh, you're the smart geeky kids. They engaged her more, and she just lit up the more she would talk about it, and you could tell she was very proud of herself for being there.
Yeah, she felt really good. Definitely. What other things in there were relevant to this chapter? Yeah.
Her teacher read Harry Potter, which she liked. So
Yeah.
teachers keep the interest of kids with what's popular at the time.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I love when she says it's like the chapter book that you can't put the pages down, right? Isn't that's what we want from our students?
She's like a dream student.
Right? I know, that's why I show. No, but it's good to hear from her what works, you know, to motivate her. Yeah. Okay, so that's self-efficacy. The next human factor that affects motivation is called self-determination. And this is the other one, the other big take-home message really from this chapter that you should highlight or star. So we tend to prefer activities where we have some autonomy in it. And autonomy, meaning we have some individual choice, we feel like our voice is heard, we have a preference. And so the belief that one has some choice and control regarding the things they do and the direction of their life. Okay. Now, self-determination isn't something that just affects motivation. It affects our overall sense of well-being. So there's a large body of psychology research that shows that if we can increase the self-determination, we can increase a slew of outcome variables, not only related to learning and motivation, but also health related. So one of my favorite studies in gerontology is done at an assisted living center. And what they did was they allowed their seniors to arrange their room however they wanted. Okay? And they showed positive, not only an impact on how the seniors were feeling psychologically, but their health benefits went up. From something as small as where do I get to put my bed and my dresser, and arrange my room, where I have some control over my environment and my life, as compared to those who don't have that. So cool, right? Just a little change like that. So we know from the learning literature, the education literature, that when we increase self-determination, we can increase our students' intrinsic motivation. So the difference really is between these two statements. I would like to learn about that, or my teacher wants me to learn about that. We want them to say this, I would like to learn about it. They might start off saying this. But if we can structure the lesson and the material effectively, then hopefully we can transform that. So they say, oh yeah, I'm actually interested in what happened during the Civil War, or whatever it is you're teaching. So this feeling that you have a choice in what you're studying and learning, not only the choice, but also the control to do that. So I have another video here that's going to demonstrate some more concepts from the chapter, specifically also the self-determination. So do the same thing, watch this video with an eye for this concept, but also thinking about the chapter as a whole. And this student is just a little bit older. And these students do come from the Colorado public school system.
Because it's interesting, I guess.
Okay. What kinds of things do you like to read?
I like to read pretty much anything, except science fiction. Yeah.
Is reading hard or easy for you?
I don't think it's very hard to read, personally, but that's just my opinion. And in terms of school, I really don't like it when the reading's required. I can't read books if they're required. I just avoid reading them because they don't seem very interesting. And even after you read them, even though they might be interesting, they're not as interesting as if you picked them up by yourself,
What things help make reading easier for you?
Well, like I said, when it's not assigned to you, it makes it easier because it's easier to find books that you like or that you're interested in.
Do you like to write?
Not really.
How come?
Because normally all the writing I do, it's like a preset subject, so you have to write about what other people want you to write about. I don't find that interesting at all.
If you had to write, what kinds of things would you choose to write about?
In terms of doing things for school, I like writing more about the issue from just an overall perspective rather than from your own. I find it easier just writing an overview than what I think. Because it's easier in a way, because when you have to think about it in your own perspective, there's kind of different things that interfere, so you can't choose one for or against or something like that. You sort of have to think about it.
Is writing in school hard or easy for you, and why?
Well, it's generally hard. My mom pretty much has to make me do it because I don't like it. It's just, I find that the main problem is I'm not interested in it mainly. It's not how difficult, in terms of coming up with ideas and stuff like that. It's just I don't want to do it. So generally teachers don't give you a lot of options. So they mainly want you to do one thing.
What things help make writing easier for you?
Well, brainstorming, like story webs and stuff, that helps a lot just to get it down, get it finished with.
All right, so not as ideal of a student, right? But I would say more typical, especially looking at adolescence. So when we look at the developmental trend of motivation, intrinsic and extrinsic, what you'll see with intrinsic motivation is that it's relatively high in elementary school. And when you get into later middle school, when peer relationships start to become more important, the intrinsic motivation decreases. And I think it also matches up with the increasing difficulty of the subjects and the assignments that are given to the students at that level. So peers and socializing becomes a priority. The education is more difficult now and less interesting in some cases, and it starts to take a back seat to that. So you see a decrease in intrinsic motivation in the early adolescent years. You then see an emergence of intrinsic motivation upon entering college for many students. Not everyone, but for many students. And the extrinsic motivation, it's hard to see developmental trends because the use of the extrinsic motivators or the behavior principles varies so much from classroom to classroom or families. So it's hard to see some of the trends there. But what did you notice? Let's first start with the self-determination. How did she demonstrate or not demonstrate this? Thomas?
Well, with how she didn't like, reading, for school or writing because it was all preset, and so she had no autonomy choosing what she wanted to read or what she wanted to write. But it was all, here's the list, this is what you do.
Yeah, and didn't we talk about this last week with content domains, right? Providing options for your students. So, yes, you're going to write a book report. Instead of giving 1 or 2 books or even 3 books, offer a wide range of books and even offer to let them choose if they meet particular requirements. And the same thing with the writing assignments. Not always possible, and not always possible with every assignment or in every subject. But you do this when and where you can to help them. Okay? Even with you guys, you've got 3 ELAs to pick from this week. Right? And I know you're like, I still don't want to do any one of them. I get that, but at least you have some choice here, right, with that. So where you can, provide the choices to help with this.
Well, especially when they're younger too, and their subject matter isn't as important as just developing skills, like just developing reading and writing skills.
Absolutely. I just want them to be writing.
Right.
So, and practicing grammar and spelling. So does it matter as much what the subject or the content is? Maybe not. Maybe so. But you have to make that choice from this informed perspective. Anything else that you saw in this video related to concepts from the chapter? Yeah, Heather.
She has some I can't pronounce the first one.
Efficacy?
That one, yes.
Yeah.
Self-efficacy about reading. She's like, well, I don't think it's very hard for me.
Right.
So that was
Sure.
that.
What about the writing?
She didn't really have as much for that because it was difficult when she had to write what they wanted her to write.
Yeah. Yep, she felt a little bit less self-efficacy in writing. And I wonder what she would have said if we talked about math or sciences. All right, cool. So this, when we looked at the YouTube video, but your book has really good suggestions for how to promote intrinsic motivation. So I just want to cover them with you quickly. The first one is to pique curiosity or inquisitiveness, right? You want to get them interested. You might have to do that by varying the teaching methods, allowing for hands-on learning, allowing your class to determine what it is that you're going to research or look at, and then teaching the content within those things. So like Jersey said, if it's writing, well, we could write about a lot of different things if I'm trying to teach grammar, right? So maybe they can decide as a class what the subject matter is. The second one is giving the children the support that they need to succeed. And this is a big one, and we've talked about this already earlier in the semester. So I take a real big issue with teachers who lower the bar, right? You don't want to lower the bar, you want to raise the bar, you want to challenge them, but you need to provide the support that they need to meet those challenges. And the support is going to build the self-efficacy. So if I take an assignment or a task that's really, really hard, and I break it down into 4 or 5 little steps, and at each step I'm saying, look, you did this, this is great, you know, you've been working so hard, you've met this step, now let's move on to the next one. So I'm building a scaffold there, but I'm showing them that they can be successful, and I'm building their self-efficacy along the way. And then at the end, they've accomplished something that was really, really difficult. And in the process, you've raised the bar. You've raised the standards. Okay? So this is a big piece. You want to show them that they can be successful. The next one is to provide opportunities for self-chosen activities, things that they're interested in, and that's what we just looked at with the self-determination. It gives them some of that autonomy that they want, especially with those adolescents. And with the adolescents, since you know that peers are so important, do more peer-related assignments or group work. Allow them to talk with one another. Okay, that would help. The last one here, number 4, is to emphasize genuine understanding rather than just rote memorization of isolated facts. Okay, so conceptual knowledge. This one is tricky because in some subjects you do have to have a very good foundation. So I think of math a lot with this. You really do have to have a good foundation or set of skills. But there are places where you want to emphasize the conceptual understanding and the meaning behind what you're doing, not just that these are facts that the students have to learn. So I said, that I really think the onus needs to be on the teacher. But going through all of this, I hope you recognize that that is not an easy task. That's a very difficult task. And there's a lot of things to consider. So we have about 5 minutes left, and I want to quickly take a look here at Maslow's theory. Remember that this isn't part of just the normal course objectives, but I think it can be helpful as you approach classrooms and recognizing the individual needs of your students. So the humanist approach from Maslow believes that motivation results from internal conceptions of your ability and your performance. That's nothing new. We've already talked about this. Okay? So from Maslow's perspective, everyone's trying to achieve what he calls self-actualization. And Chance, does the Army use the be all that you can be anymore?
One of their big motivators is now they say Army of One.
Army of
So
One, okay.
It's kind of the exact same thing, but every time that you form a formation, you scream that as loud as you can, and the louder people scream it, the more intense everyone gets.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think when I hear this self-actualization, I've always thought of that slogan of be all that you can be, achieve self-actualization, and that would be the goal. And that's why we are motivated to achieve this ideal self, according to Maslow. So he has 7 individual needs. Is anyone familiar with any of this? Some of you? It's really applicable. So when we look at the class example, I think you'll see that clearly. There are 4 deficiency needs. These are our basic needs as humans. And then there are 3 growth or being needs, and these are secondary or higher level. So when you look at it all together, it builds itself up in this pyramid. So on the bottom, you have your deficiency needs, and there's 4 of them. Physiological. What does that include? Shelter, water, food. Yeah, it's the things that you need to survive. Safety needs. Sure, so where I feel like I'm not going to be harmed, and shelter could be also part of that, right? So I feel safe. Love and belonging. I feel like I fit in, I'm accepted. I have people who love and care for me. And esteem. I feel good about myself. One of the strengths of Maslow's theory is that he has love and belonging and esteem as part of the deficiency needs. Basic needs that need to be met as a human being. Okay? Now the top one are growth or being. knowing and understanding school. This is where school would come in. Okay? Facts. Knowing and understanding your environment, your world, and learning. Aesthetic appreciation would be the arts or appreciation for beauty. And then the top one is when you actually have met this self-actualization. When you have climbed up all of these needs and you feel like you are, you feel competent, you feel like you're at your peak. You're being all that you can be. Right? There's been a lot of research that's challenged this. So I'm not telling you to just blindly accept this, but I think there are some good lessons that we can take into the classroom. So if you had to think of this hierarchy of needs in an economically diverse classroom, you're a teacher, and you've got students who, some are very low SES, socioeconomic status, and some that are very high. How might this play a role? How might these needs play a role? Yeah, Stephanie?
We would want to make sure that there's like a breakfast program offered so that they can eat first because they can't concentrate on anything if they're hungry.
Yeah. So, and that's true for me too. So, you know, if I'm hungry, I'm not learning about anything. I'm not appreciating beauty. Okay, I'm crabby. It's like the Snickers commercial with the seatbelt. Yeah.
Bullying would affect most of the deficiency because you don't feel safe, you don't feel like you belong, your self-esteem goes down.
All of these. And even maybe some physical issues. Yeah. And that is a big problem in our school systems.
Unfortunately, I think a lot of teachers fill a safety need because they don't have that security in their home environment, and a lot of kids in that environment, they latch on to because they do have stability and they do have compassion with their teachers, and that's something that I think sometimes we forget, that we may see that little Johnny is just this annoying kid, but we don't realize that we're actually the only one that's getting them attention.
And consistent. Consistency in that relationship, yeah.
Well, like I had interpersonal communication last semester, and like, one of the things we actually talked about, like how in a classroom Maslow's like hierarchy of needs like works, and basically we came to the conclusion that like relationships between each and every peer, each and every teacher with the peer, you know, tends to stabilize out when there's like a minimal agreement reached of what is wanted from each party member. So like, you know, once they've come to an idea,
established idea of what the relationship will serve or not serve. Yeah, definitely. So somebody mentioned the breakfast program for, you know, low SES students. The one thing that I want to take home is that this is not just a low SES classroom, it's also high. So what might be some issues with the high SES kids in this? Are they just floating through? Is everything good? What are some of the problems? It's all the same people. Come on, Derek. Love you guys, but, huh?
Negligence.
What do you mean by negligence? Yeah.
They also might not have as much attention from their parents as well.
Yeah.
They might be working all the time and they're not there.
Absolutely.
Or they might have other brothers and sisters, especially younger babies or something. So they feel like attention is now being put towards their other siblings.
Sure. Yeah, so maybe they have, you know, all the food and nutrition being met, great house, everything seems great. But, you know, to pay for that great house and all that food, their parents are working all of the time. And maybe they're missing some of the love and belongingness, or maybe some of the esteem from a brother or sister. And, yeah. Yeah.
I was going to say what he said, but on the opposite end, you have kids who have too much parental pressure or attention.
Absolutely.
You know, they're really pushing their kids to be the best, and you need to do this, you need to do this, and that.
Yeah, and that can have the opposite effects for motivation. Sure. All right, so we had a chance to cover everything that we were looking at. Definition of motivation, intrinsic, extrinsic. Think a little bit about that motivation questionnaire I gave you. That's exactly what that was assessing. The human factors affecting motivation, self-efficacy and determinism, how we can promote intrinsic development, and then we did spend a little bit of time on humanist approach. I have it highlighted because it's not a particular focus or emphasis for us, but I think it's interesting. I know it was in April. It's just a template. What we didn't get to, developmental trends, talks a little bit about how it decreases in adolescence, defining self-regulation and discussing its development and application to the classroom. So next week we have self and social development. It's chapter 12, quiz 11. No, quiz 12. Chapter 12, quiz 12. We're back on track. And it's ELA 3. That'll be coming in.
Here's the summary as just reviewed. Spend some time here looking at what we covered and then what we did not cover, but that you're still responsible for knowing.